I remember so clearly my child's first day of kindergarten, and she hopped onto that bus with so much excitement and the biggest grin. And as the bus was pulling away, I waved to her, and she was waving so hard back that she was bouncing in her seat. And so my heart pulled away with that bus that day. When I look back on that moment, there's also a twinge of sadness, because what I didn't know at the time is that my daughter had something called dyslexia. I knew nothing about dyslexia, and it seems like something that should be so simple. But what it is, because we have to first talk about what dyslexia is, and also we have to talk about what we think it is, because those are two very different things. There are a lot of misconceptions about it. But dyslexia, yes, it is difficulty with reading, but it's language-based. It's neurological in origin, and these people are really, really smart. They're of average to high intelligence. There are lots of famous people that have dyslexia, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Albert Einstein, and to be very relatable, especially to my generation, the Fonz. How can you forget that, and how can you not love that? But what I learned in going through this also was that I had my own misconceptions, and I wasn't alone. When we got the diagnosis in second grade, I was so happy because I thought, oh, now we know what it is. We can get this fixed, because I witnessed her struggling for years with sight words. And if you don't have a child of elementary age these days, sight words are like flashcards. You flip through them. It'll have the word at, the, where, etc. And one day she would get them, and the next day she wouldn't. And what I came to learn from the neuropsychologist who diagnosed her was, he said to me, Carole, your daughter's not reading. She has memorized, and she has reached her capacity. Memorization is not reading. And I broke down in tears. And because I witnessed how hard it was for her. When we told her that you have dyslexia, we agonized over that, and she was freed by the label. People debate whether the label is helpful or not. We shouldn't label children. She was freed because guess what? She knew she wasn't the strongest reader. She knew something was going on that other kids were getting and she wasn't. So she had a name and we had a name. And I was so excited. I walked into school the next day with this diagnosis and I put it down. I said, now we know what's going on. Because all along I had been told your child's reading is age appropriate and grade appropriate until one day I was told, you need to take your child out and have her tested. Something's not right, and I agree with you, Carole. I thought once we had the diagnosis and we had that name that it would be so easy from there, but it wasn't. We went through some very hard times, and I'll tell you, with the misconceptions around dyslexia, does it look like I really didn't read to my child? Because that's one. I didn't think so. Yes, I read to her, and I read to her so much, and we practiced so much. And it's called the drill and kill method, actually, what we wind up doing to our kids who can't read. We work so hard with them to get them to learn to read that it just is demoralizing. Because you know what happens? I can't get this. And if I can't get this, I must be stupid. And that's not the case at all. These are kids that learn differently, and they're incredibly smart. Let me tell you, Google and other high-tech companies have figured out that this is the gold mine of where they need to be attracting employees. These are highly intelligent people that think differently, and they're designing workforces around them. They get it. We haven't figured it out yet, educationally or within our society. Over time, what happened with my child, and I don't like sharing this part of the story, but it's very real, and I share it because there are a lot of what I call Me Too's out there. Her story is not unusual, and when I tell her story, people say, me too, I was going through that. So what happened over time was by the time she hit third grade, because she wasn't getting the services that she needed from school, she wasn't learning. And here's how critical third grade is, so you have an idea in terms of reading. By third grade, up until third grade, students are learning to read. By the time they hit third grade, they are reading to learn. Put that in perspective. I have a child that can't read, and she went through 4 years, 8 hours a day at school of curriculum that she could not access. And that's beyond reading. I'm talking science, social studies, math, because there's lots of reading in math. How could we ever forget word problems? Imagine if you're dyslexic and it's just so hard to even work through that. And that was very painful. And so she would get off the bus in those harder times. She would walk in, she would go to the pantry, and she would get her snack. And without a word, she would go upstairs and she would sit on the floor of her closet in the dark. And I would go with her, and I would sit in the dark with her because I didn't know what else to do. And the anxiety that she faced, that our kids face in situations like that is overwhelming. It's far too overwhelming for a young child to navigate. And so as I got into this, I started to inform myself more. And I am amazed to this day when there are conversations about literacy. Why aren't we talking about dyslexia? Dyslexia affects 1 in 5 people. 1 in 5, and that's staggering. And we are the largest of all disabilities. We make up 80% of all disabilities. That's huge. I like to call this the low-hanging fruit of achievement. If we can get these kids identified early and the right services early, then they will blow the roof off of achievement. Remember, Google knows it. But that's not what's happening. Unfortunately, my story is more the norm out there. The societal costs of literacy, illiteracy, are staggering. But there's some really cool things going on, and there is a lot of progress being made. So consider, for example, that 60% of our inmate population is illiterate. Dyslexia is 1 in 5. I mean, already we're talking 1 out of every 2 prisoners. We're overrepresented in the prison population. 85% of our juvenile offenders have some symptoms of dyslexia and reading difficulty. I love book drives. Please do book drives. But amid all the conversation, why aren't we saying, are these kids being tested? Because I bet they're not. And we're not talking about a disability that affects most of those who have a reading issue. There is also a cost on the school district end. There's a school district nearby who decided, we're going to do it right. We're going to identify early, and we're going to service these kids in the way they need to be serviced, and we're going to provide a reading method consistently across the curriculum that meets the needs of all these kids. Because, by the way, the reading method that helps dyslexics helps all kids. That's the beautiful thing about it. This is so solvable. It's the good news. And so what they found after that point in time is that not only did they help kids, more kids, but they reduced the number of kids on what's called an IEP, an individual education plan, by 60%. So I cannot tell you enough that we should not tolerate the conversation that this is too expensive. By the way, it's the law, number 1, that is often not followed in that we have to find these kids. Because unfortunately, as a parent, what you learn out there is that sometimes the game is played that if we don't identify a student, we don't have to serve them. And that is a sad, sad game. I'll tell you, I will forever look at my child and wonder a little bit, what would she be and who would she be when she grows up if she were serviced early and identified early properly? There's always that in the back of your head. I will tell you, fast forward to today, she makes me so proud because you're talking about a kid that 8 hours a day, 4 years, she got off that bus and she was beat upon. There is something positive about failure, but let me tell you, when you fail every day for 8 hours, it's wearing, and it's demoralizing. And that's what's happening with our kids. We are losing our kids, and we're losing them in third grade. And third grade is simply too late to identify our kids. They can be identified as early as kindergarten. And that's what we need to do. Because for all of about $30 in 20 minutes, we can find these kids, and we can get to them, so that we're not paying over the long term of their educational career, but we're paying at the front end to do it right and for less time. Talk about cost. It's amazing. We need our politicians and those decision makers to understand that it's just penny wise, pound foolish to delay it. If we act like we can't see it, because it is a hidden disability, so it makes it easy to not see, it's wrong and it's costly. We need our educators to understand, because they're only beginning to really, what dyslexia is. It's just a fact that Ohio colleges were not teaching this. They were teaching very little on it until the last year or so. So when I walked in with my child's diagnosis, my teachers asked me for information on dyslexia. I love her to pieces, and I will always have a special place in my heart for her. And teachers work darn hard, and that's a whole separate TED Talk. But we need parents, too, to be uncompromising. I will always be thankful, for as hard as this journey is, that it made me the hero that my child thinks I am, because I know at the end of the day, I fought the fight for her. And that's a darn good feeling, but I fought it because it was the right thing to do. One of the things that I've been helpful in doing is to work with our school system to create an organization, a network for parents, where we provide information. Parents, you have to get informed. The best way that we can take care of dyslexia is if we're doing it together. We're better together than we are separately. And for former dyslexics, just know that you probably had phonics when you were in school, which is how you probably got through, some without a struggle and some with. So as we go forward, I hope that Ohio will focus more on these factors. The Columbus Foundation has a very interesting study that they came out with in the last year, and they identified a cost to illiteracy. And this is why we need to care, and care now, about doing something. They noted that illiteracy cost $647 million a year in lost wages, lost taxes, in services needed. That number is staggering. It doesn't have to be. So I thank you for your time tonight, and I hope that if there are any that are listening that say, that's me, or me too, that you will stand up and do something about it. Thank you.